Hey everyone and welcome back. Today we're diving into something that, might sound a little bit dry at first, but trust me, it's going to be super useful for you, I promise.
Oh, I have no doubt.
We're going deep on Barbara Minto's pyramid principle, and that is basically like the ultimate blueprint for clear communication.
Yeah,
Have you ever felt like, you've got these great ideas, but they kind of get lost in translation when you try to explain them to other people?
all the time. Happens to everybody, I think.
This is for you.
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny how this principle was developed way back in the 70s,
Oh, wow. Okay.
but it's even more relevant today.
Really? Why is that?
Well, I mean, just think about it. We're drowning in information these days, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Everywhere we turn. So the pyramid principle, it's like this life raft. It helps you organize all your thoughts so they can actually make an impact instead of getting lost in the sea of information.
Makes sense. So this was born out of the consulting world, right?
It was, yeah.
McKinsey, to be exact.
That's right. Barbara Minto was a consultant there.
Okay.
And she saw firsthand how, like, muddled thinking, even from really smart people, could just totally derail a project.
Oh, interesting.
So this principle was her solution. It was a way to just cut through the clutter, and get straight to the point.
Okay, so let's break it down. What does this pyramid actually look like? If we were to, draw it out.
Yeah, so picture an actual pyramid, like an Egyptian one's.
Okay.
At the very top, the peak, that's your main message, the answer to whatever the question at hand is.
Okay.
Then you have the supporting arguments, and those form the middle layer, kind of like the strong sides of the pyramid.
Okay. I like the analogy.
And then finally, the base of the pyramid, that's all about evidence.
Uh-huh.
Data, examples, the stuff that backs up your arguments.
So instead of kind of building suspense and revealing your conclusion at the end, you're saying lead with it.
Lead with it, yeah.
Isn't that a bit unusual?
It might seem counterintuitive, I know. But think about it. It's actually how we consume information today.
That's true.
Right, we scan, we scroll, we want that key takeaway right up front.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like when you're reading a news article online, you scan the headline first
Totally.
to see if it's even worth your time.
Yeah, if it's not, you're just moving on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so this answer-first approach, you're saying, it's really playing into our modern attention spans.
It totally is, yeah. There was this study by the Nielsen-Norman Group. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have, yeah.
They found that something like 79% of people scan web content
Wow.
instead of actually reading it word for word.
So that's almost 80% of us just kind of skimming.
Pretty much, yeah. So leading with your conclusion, it's not just about being concise. It's about working with how our brains are wired.
Wow, that's a huge percentage. No wonder so many messages get lost, right?
Right.
We're all just in a hurry.
Yeah.
But is that the only reason this structure works so well? The attention span.
No, there's more to it than that. It also has to do with the primacy effect. Have you heard of that?
I have, yeah.
So we tend to remember the first things we have the best.
Okay.
And by presenting information in a way that's structured and hierarchical, it's like you're giving your audience a mental map. It makes it way easier to digest and actually remember.
That makes total sense, yeah. So I'm sold on leading with my main point, but how do I make sure it actually lands?
Ah, that's where that middle layer of your pyramid comes in, those supporting arguments.
Okay, yeah.
Think of them like the pillars holding up your main point.
Okay.
Each one should be a distinct idea, but it needs to directly support that conclusion at the top.
And would each of those arguments then have their own supporting evidence, down at the base of the pyramid?
Exactly. That's where you bring in that data we talked about.
Okay.
The facts, the examples, this is what adds credibility and weight to those arguments and makes your overall message way more persuasive.
So you're basically creating a chain of logic, right? Leading from the evidence all the way up to that main point at the top.
You got it. And the beauty of this whole pyramid principle is that it guides both the speaker and the audience.
I see.
So everyone's on the same page, literally following the same logical path.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be a game changer for presentations.
Oh, yeah.
No more rambling, no more losing the audience halfway through.
Exactly. And there's another really cool element to all of this that makes it even more effective.
Okay, tell me.
It's called the SCQA framework. It's like the secret sauce that actually turns data into a compelling story.
Now you've got my attention. Tell me more about this SCQA. What does it stand for?
It stands for situation, complication, question, answer. And it's kind of like you're setting up a movie.
Oh, okay.
You need a setup, right?
Right, yeah.
The situation is like setting the scene. You're establishing the context for everything that's going to follow.
Okay.
Then you introduce a problem, the complication, and this creates tension. It makes the audience actually want a resolution.
Ooh, I like where this is going. So you're hooking the audience right from the start.
Exactly, yeah. Then comes the question, which naturally arises from this whole complication that you just introduced.
Okay.
And finally, you have the big reveal, the answer. And you guessed it, that's the peak of your pyramid, your main point.
I am starting to see how this SCQA framework adds like another layer of storytelling to the whole pyramid principle. So it's not just presenting information, it's actually making it engaging.
Exactly, yeah. It helps even complex topics become more relatable and memorable.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay.
Like, think about a presentation on a new marketing campaign, like one targeting Gen Z, for example.
Okay, a hot topic.
Right. So it could start with the situation, like Gen Z is this huge market, but they're hard to reach with all the traditional methods.
Okay, yeah, so that sets the scene. So what would be the complication in this scenario?
The complication could be that your competitors are already capture all this market share,
Makes sense.
and your current strategies are falling behind, creates a little bit of urgency.
Definitely. So then the question becomes, how do we effectively connect with Gen Z?
Yeah, to regain that market share.
Okay.
And then the answer, that peak of the pyramid, might be a proposal for a completely new approach.
Like what?
Like investing in a TikTok-first strategy, something that resonates with how Gen Z actually consumes content.
Oh, that's a really clear example. I like it.
Yeah.
So the SCQA framework just adds so much depth to that basic pyramid structure. It's like turning a presentation into a mini-movie.
Exactly, yeah. And that's just scratching the surface. The pyramid principle has so many applications,
I bet.
from writing emails to structuring like entire reports. It's a truly versatile tool.
It sounds like it. This is fascinating. We'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsor.
Sounds good.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cloutfit.ai.
CLOUTFIT.ai.
That's Cloutfit.ai, the B2B fashion commerce platform that's using AI to boost user engagement and, of course, revenue.
Of course.
Check them out now. Back to our deep dive.
Okay, let's go. What's really fascinating to me about this whole pyramid principle is that it's not just for these big, formal presentations.
Really?
Yeah, it's a framework, and you can actually apply it to almost any kind of communication,
Oh, wow.
even a quick email.
Really, I always thought of it as more of a formal presentation thing. How would that work for something like an email?
Well, think about it. Have you ever gotten an email that was just rambling and rambling?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
And it takes forever to get to the point.
The worst.
Super frustrating.
Yeah.
The pyramid principle, it helps you avoid that.
How so?
Well, instead of burying the lead, you start your email with that key message, the answer to whatever the recipient's likely question is.
Okay.
And then in the following paragraphs, you provide all the supporting details.
So if I'm requesting feedback on a project, for example, I should start by just directly asking for the feedback,
Yeah,
and then I would follow up with all the details about the project itself.
exactly. That way, the recipients, they immediately understand what you want.
Makes sense.
And they can delve into those specifics if they need to.
So it's all about respecting their time and making sure the message is clear from the get-go.
Exactly, yeah. It's like applying that answer-first approach, but on a smaller scale.
Okay, I like it. But what about situations where you need to convey a lot of information? Wouldn't a pyramid structure feel too simplistic for that?
Not necessarily. Remember, the pyramid principle is all about organizing your thoughts logically.
Okay, yeah.
It's not about oversimplifying. You can totally present complex information, but you're just doing it in a way that's digestible and easy to follow.
So how would you approach a more complex topic, like a whole report, using this principle?
It's all about breaking down the information into smaller chunks.
Okay,
Your main point, the one at the top, would be the overall conclusion of the report or the recommendation.
okay, yeah.
And then each section of the report would basically become its own mini pyramid
Okay.
with its own key takeaway and then the supporting arguments that go underneath.
So it's like nesting pyramids.
Yeah, exactly. And then within each of those sections, you would use those same principles. Lead with the key takeaway, follow it with supporting arguments and evidence, and it creates this hierarchy. It gets really easy for the reader to just navigate.
Okay, I see how that could work. But wouldn't that make the report feel repetitive if you're always kind of doing the same thing?
Not if you use strong transitions and vary your language. The goal is to create a flow of information that feels natural and engaging. You don't want to sound like a robot.
Right. Okay. So it's about using the principle as a framework, but not letting it dictate your entire writing style.
Exactly. It's a tool, not a straitjacket.
I like that.
The most important thing is to be clear, concise, and persuasive, regardless of what format you're using.
I'm curious, can you apply this principle to more creative forms of communication as well,
Oh, interesting question.
like storytelling or even songwriting?
That's a great question. And while the pyramid principle is usually associated with business, I think the underlying principles, clear thinking, structured storytelling, those can be applied to any form of creative expression.
So how would that work? Would a songwriter start with the chorus, for example, and then kind of build the verses around that central theme?
Yeah, it's possible. The chorus, it's often like the emotional heart of a song.
Right.
So leading with that could definitely be effective to capture the listener's attention.
Okay.
And then the verses, those provide context, they tell the story, and they ultimately lead back to that central theme.
I love that idea. It's like the chorus becomes the peak of the pyramid, and then the verses are the supporting arguments, all building up to this emotional climax.
Exactly, yeah. And, even in something like a novel, the pyramid principle can help you outline the plot. The main point could be like the central conflict or theme of the story, and then each chapter functions as a mini pyramid,
Yeah.
advancing the plot and building towards a resolution.
This is making me realize that the pyramid principle is more than just a communication tool. It's actually like a way of thinking, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's about organizing your ideas so they're clear, compelling, impactful, regardless of the medium.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about understanding that clarity is really at the heart of all effective communication.
Yeah.
Whether you're writing a report or composing a song or even just having a regular conversation.
As we've been talking about this, I've been wondering, can this pyramid principle ever backfire?
That's a good question, and it definitely can. If it's not used thoughtfully, one pitfall is just being too rigid with the structure.
So it's not about forcing every single piece of information into like a perfect pyramid shape.
Exactly. It's a framework, it's a guide, not a set of rules.
Okay,
The goal is to be clear and persuasive, not to create a visually appealing pyramid on a piece of paper.
makes sense. So how do you know when to be flexible with that structure?
It really depends on the context and who your audience is. For example, if you're presenting to a group that's like super analytical,
Yeah.
they might actually appreciate a more structured approach. But if you're talking to a group that's more on the creative side,
Hmm.
you might need to loosen up a bit, allow for some tangents.
Okay, so it's about reading the room and adapting your style to fit the situation.
Exactly. And another pitfall is kind of neglecting that human element.
Okay,
The pyramid principle is great for organizing information, but you don't want to forget that communication is about connecting with people.
so you don't want to sound like a robot just spitting out facts and figures.
Yeah, exactly. You need to bring your own personality, your passion to the table, use storytelling,
Yeah.
engage your audience, make sure your message is resonating with them on an emotional level.
That's a great point. The pyramid principle is a tool. It's not a substitute for genuine human connection.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another interesting point. While the pyramid principle is super valuable, it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It's one tool in your communication toolbox.
So what are some other tools or techniques that work well alongside it?
Well, storytelling is a big one, like we talked about earlier. Using that SCQA framework can help you transform data into a story that people actually want to listen to.
Yeah.
Another important one is active listening. Pay attention to your audience's questions, their concerns, address them thoughtfully.
So it's a two-way street. It's not just about you transmitting information.
That's right.
You're engaging in a dialogue with the other person.
Exactly. And finally, don't underestimate the power of nonverbal communication. Your body language, your tone of voice, your eye contact,
Yeah.
it all plays a role.
It's like the pyramid principle provides the structure, but the delivery is what really brings it to life.
Precisely. It's that combination of clear thinking and engaging delivery that makes for truly effective communication.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We explored the structure of the pyramid principle, the applications, and even some of the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, and we've seen how this principle that came from the business world can be applied to so many different parts of our lives.
Exactly. From writing emails to delivering presentations to even crafting compelling stories, the pyramid principle is a tool for anyone who wants to communicate more clearly and effectively.
And as our world just gets more and more complex and we're just overloaded with information, that ability to cut through the noise and get your point across is just so valuable.
Absolutely. So next time you're struggling to get your ideas across, remember the power of that pyramid. Start with your main point, support it with those logical arguments and evidence, and then just deliver your message with passion and authenticity.
And don't be afraid to experiment, adapt the principle to fit your own style and the needs of whoever you're talking to.
This has been a really insightful conversation. I've learned a lot today.
Me too.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been a pleasure. And hey, if you found this deep dive useful, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into other fascinating topics.
That's all for today's episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep thinking clearly and communicating powerfully.